Yo guys, Ponchy here, and today we're going to learn how to use song mode on our Analog Rhythm Mark II. Now this is one I should have done a really long time ago. It's probably one of the best song modes out there on a machine today. Dare I say? I don't know. You'll have to decide for yourself. Let's go! Alright guys, song mode. Let's go. So to access song mode, you just press this button. And so once song mode is red right here, that means that whenever you press play, it will start playing the song mode from that point in the song, based on whatever pattern you're on at the time. So I have a few patterns down here, so you'll of course need a few different patterns for song mode. So in order to edit the song, you want to hit Function and Edit Song over here. And so this is the screen that it should come up with initially. So in order to add patterns to the song, all you do is hit Function and Yes. Now you hit that as many times as you want changes in the song, essentially. So for every row, you can have multiple patterns. And the way that you add the patterns is you hit right, and you'll see kind of a cursor pop up there, and then you just hit the patterns as if you were going to change to patterns normally when you're using your analog rhythm. So if I want to add pattern A2 right there, just hit A and 2. So, and then of course you can add really as many as you want. I mean, obviously there's a limit, but let's just say that it's most likely that we're not going to hit the limit. So you have plenty of room. And this, essentially each row applies to the chain video that I made before. So if you want a little more information about chains, then definitely go check those out. So right now I'm essentially just going to add a row for each pattern. So I'm going to keep hitting Yes, Function and Yes. So I have, let's see, I have 7 or 8 patterns. I'm just going to do 7. So for the second pattern, and of course you use up and down to access the different rows. So for the second row, I'm going to do pattern 2, pattern 3, and so on. Okay. So now, for now, I'm going to go ahead and just remove this chain that I have here on the first row. Bam. Okay. So now if I hit play from here, you can see that the song is being played, essentially going through every single pattern that I have here. And each pattern here is set to only play one time. And of course, one time refers to however many you have set up in the page menu here. So if you have any questions about that, definitely leave a comment below. But, so essentially, say you wanted to start playing from a certain row in the song, just go ahead and hit Yes. That will highlight that row, and then once you hit play, it'll start playing from that exact point in the song. Some other interesting things you can do: you can move certain rows up and down simply by pressing Function and up or down. So say I want to move pattern 2 down here where pattern 6 is, just hit Function and move that down there. So that's definitely a super easy way to move rows up and down. So a way to make these repeat more than once is you get your cursor and go left all the way until you reached the 1x, and then using knob A here, that's where you can adjust how many times you want it to repeat, all the way up to 99. definitely the song mode is more than enough for most people's purposes, unless you're doing something really crazy and out there, which is always encouraged, but just know that you have plenty of leeway in your song mode here. I like them all being played once. Now, the reason for that is because, say I want to add some mutes in here. I'm going to move A2 back up to where it was, so they're all in order. You know, and these kind of things are stylistic choices. However you want to run song mode, you know, that's up to you in terms of how you want to structure your songs. So to add mutes to this pattern, just go over to the mute mode here. And you'll notice that the pads are yellow instead of the usual green. And say I want to mute the kick and snare for that pattern. So I'll just mute the kick and snare. That's where I have them set up fairly traditionally here. Bass drum, snare drum. So, and then if I move up and down the patterns, you can see that there is clearly 2 tracks muted out of A2. And then also, if you look over here in the bottom right, you'll notice that there's some squares. Those squares correspond to the tracks over here. So you can clearly see that track 1 and 2 are muted. You'll also notice some numbers over here in the right. So the top right, that's the BPM. The one beneath it has to do with position, basically. And then the one down here in the very bottom right is the overall position. So you'll notice that the more you step through each row, the more that grows. So if you were to start it from here, you'd essentially be starting from bar 13. And because each one of these particular patterns are only 1 bar a piece or 1 page a piece, then if you go down, you just go from 13 to 14 to 15. So the interesting thing about the mutes, come back up here, you'll notice that A2 is still muted. The interesting thing about this is if you add another pattern, let's add another instance of A2, you'll notice that they are indeed not muted. So the mutes in song mode are specific to each instance of the pattern. So this A2, they're muted. This A2, they're not. So that, to me, is one of the best ways you can use chains in song mode. Is, say, like for example, A2, if I play it, oh, I gotta select it first. Select it, then play it. So you'll notice that's an interesting way to add some variation to a single pattern, because when I have the bass drum and the snare drum muted the first time around, or should I say on the first pattern of the chain, then that gives it more of a intro feel or more of a breakdown feel. And then once the second instance of pattern A2 comes up, the snare and kick, of course, are not muted, so that gives it more of like a verse feel, or you know, you're building it up somehow. You know, you could have a whole pattern or a whole chain of A2s, and then each time it goes through, you're unmuting something, so you're essentially building the beat up on its own, so that way you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. And ultimately, that's what song mode is used for, is if you have other machines that you're using. Right now you can't see it, but I have my Analog 4 here to the right. My Octatrack is up top here, and then to the right of that is my Analog Heat. So I like to do songs on my Analog Rhythm, create songs on the rhythm, because then that way I can worry about doing other things on the Analog 4, for example, or on the Octatrack. You know, I can be messing with scenes on the Octatrack or doing the quick performance stuff on the Analog 4, both of which I do have some videos about that. So check those out if you want. But song mode on the Analog Rytm is super powerful, especially if your Analog Rytm is reserved mostly for beats. Yes, I do have some synth sounds on here that I sampled from one of my Moogs, but I don't normally do that on the Analog Rytm. I mostly reserve the tracks for just drum sounds, but in this case I did add some Moog samples. So, but you know, that's the beauty of the Rytm, of course. I definitely don't want to tell you how to use it, but to me, you know, these are some of the most powerful ways to use it in the instance of using the Rytm just as a beat machine and then reserving other machines for melodic sounds. So another interesting thing, we still have those two pads muted on this chain right here for A2, the first A2. So if we hit no, and we just happen to have song mode disabled, you'll notice that these are kind of dim. They're not fully lit, but they are dim. What that indicates is that there is currently some mutes in the active song. So you can only have one song active at a time, similar to a kit, but these two, the fact that they're dimly lit, that will indicate that you have some mutes somewhere in your song. So that's up to you to figure out where they are, but you know, this is just kind of a helpful indicator that indeed you do have some mutes going on. So if that's not what you want, then you definitely need to look through your song and make sure you unmute the ones that you don't want muted. So then another interesting thing is whichever pattern you're on at the time. So say we go to A3, whatever pattern you're on at the time, the active pattern that includes in the chain, you can do the mutes on the fly. So say you have a pattern that's part of a chain, that's part of a row, that's part of your active song. Say you have a pattern that repeats maybe 3 or 4 times, whatever it may be. You can actively mute tracks while the song is playing. So all you have to do is hold song mode, and you'll notice that the pads turn yellow like they were in edit song mode. And then you can go ahead and just mute stuff while you're not necessarily in the song mode. You'll notice that when I let go, they're still muted normally. So if I was to disable song mode and just play the pattern normally, it would play those tracks. However, if we're actively in a song and this is enabled, you'll notice that they're not playing. And then you see there that it's switched to the next pattern or chain or row, whichever one comes first. So that's pretty much it for song menu. There is one last thing. There is an actual song menu for when you press function and perf. That takes you to the song menu. Then you have the opportunity to reload, load, save, clear, or edit a song. Edit will just take you back to where we were. And then of course clear will go ahead and clear the active song. So you can save up to 16 songs, and that is on a per project basis. So, you know, that's quite a few songs. Essentially, if you played your cards right, you could run a whole, you know, almost a whole set of music from just one project. You know, say for example, you could reserve each bank to one song per se, one song of 16 patterns, and then, you know, whenever you're done with that, you could load a new song and go into the B bank, which has another 16 patterns you can reserve for a song. You know, and that's kind of overestimating it. You could essentially, you know, you could probably get away with fitting a song maybe in just 8 patterns. So that way, that would double the amount of songs you could fit in each bank. So in theory, you could have 2 songs in bank A, 1 through 8, 9 through 16. You could have 2 songs in bank B, and so on. So there's many ways to look at using the analog rhythm. And yes, the song modes, when you're editing a song, you can put patterns from other banks in the song. So I don't have a pattern in bank 1 right now, bank B, pattern 1, but once that's done playing, it would of course automatically switch to the other bank and the other pattern. So super powerful. Hope that helps you guys. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions about song mode, and if you need any clarification, and myself or someone else in the comments would be glad to help. But other than that, hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.